Well, hello, everyone. We are so glad you can join us today. I'm Jim Obold, President of Servant Solutions, and I will be serving as your host of today's webinar titled The Elephant in the Boardroom, Critical Conversations Regarding Pastoral Compensation. Not only is Servant Solutions here to serve those individuals who serve, but also to serve the churches and organizations who employ those who serve. Something that is very important to us is encouraging churches and church leaders to make it a priority to show their pastors that they care and to be proactive in doing that before the pastor has to initiate their own compensation conversation. Just a reminder that we will have a Q&A after our 15-minute presentation, so please feel free to use the chat feature to ask your questions, and we will attempt to answer as many of those as possible. If you are not the treasurer, administrator, executive pastor, etc., but are in fact the pastor, this issue of talking about your own compensation and benefits can be difficult to initiate to those that need to hear it. We get that. If this is your case, please do us a favor. Please tell those that need to hear this information that we invited you to this webinar today and that we asked you to forward this information onto them. That takes you off the hook. And it is on us because we asked you to do that, okay? Those things said, I want to introduce you to three of our team members who all happen to be pastors in our plan. So the first one is Reverend David Boots. He serves as our Western U.S. Member Relations Director. David brings perspective from his 35 years in church ministry, many of those as administrative or executive pastor. David has budgeted for, administered, and led countless staff in their retirement planning. Next is Reverend Nabil Safi. He serves as our Vice President and COO for Servant Solutions, and before his service here, he served as an executive pastor at one of our larger churches in the Indianapolis area. And finally, Chuck Myricks is with us. Chuck not only serves as our Servant Solutions Eastern U.S. Member Relations Director, but is also a full-time senior pastor at one of our prominent churches, Arlington Church of God in Akron, Ohio. So Chuck, let's first start with you. Would you share a bit from the perspective of a lead pastor, your experience in conversations with your board or finance committee about compensation? And do you think your experience is unique or not?
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Jim, and greetings to all of our friends across the country. My experience has been a wonderful one, and I hope that is not rare. I've started pastoring 3 years ago here at my home congregation, and I have been so blessed by the openness and support that I've received from my board. I meet with our board chair on a monthly basis. We have lunch together or breakfast, whatever fits his schedule, and we look at what's happening both in the church and in my life. And they care for me so much that it's easy to care for the congregation, and I'm grateful for that. One little story that happened once when we were out, we were parked at a restaurant, and I didn't know him that well at the time because we had just started. And I didn't know his car. He didn't know my car. We didn't come at the same time. And when we went to leave, it turned out that we were parked next to one another. And he went to get in his car, and I went to get in my car, and his car was, of a BMW variety, and my car was one that had duct tape on the front window. But he said to me, hey, you're going to be leading funerals, and we'd rather it not be with duct tape. And that led to a conversation about a car allowance. And so I was grateful for that.
Wow.
It's just an example of the partnership that we've enjoyed. It's been open. It's been honest. I would never take advantage of the church, but the church is determined not to take advantage of me and my family. And so we grow together, and we're grateful for that.
Thanks, Chuck. And so now I want to toss the ball to you now, David, and ask you to talk to those on the call who are responsible to monitor their pastor's compensation on the importance of regularly reviewing their package, when to do it, and the importance of making sure you remain fair, of honoring your pastor, and of keeping current with salary, housing, and benefits compensation.
Thanks, Jim. Hey, everybody, it's so good to be with you today, and thanks for joining us. But it is important to be sure, first of all, you have an annual routine that the board has. I trust that your church, your board, someone is a keeper of the calendar. And that is so very important. So if you're not confident of that, I would say start with that. Make sure that whoever watches that church calendar or your calendar of events, that there's an internal memo at least that pops up every year at the appropriate time. For many churches, we budget January through December. And so that time we find is October. We start the conversations. Would not be too early at all in early to mid-October to be having those conversations, because we most often we want our budgets to be ready to go by the end of November. So definitely get it calendared, make sure it's there. Maybe it's the board secretary that takes care of that. In a smaller church, the board sometimes would keep those important things that they need to do each year, like reviewing insurance. And this is outside of staff compensation, but there are annual things that you need to do. So make sure it's on the calendar. Often the organization's treasurer or a finance committee or a finance team will review the pastor's compensation package. And as the church grows, sometimes then as they add staff, there would be maybe a lead pastor and an associate pastor or an executive pastor. Again, depends on the size of the staff. But that lead pastor, along with that executive pastor or associate, might be the one to review the other staff packages and then bring recommendations to the board or the treasurer. And then once those are approved, they would then add those to the budget or input those to the budget. There's some great resources available to use in determining salary structure. If you feel like you're totally in the dark and have no clue, are you on track with other churches? How do we compare? There's some great resources, and we have those available on our website. As Jim said, we're going to have a link for some resources at the end of this webinar as well. One I want to mention here that we so much appreciate is churchsalary.com. And churchsalary.com puts out reports. In fact, I just received a note about 3 days ago that they've just uploaded all their current data for the where things are now for people that are budgeting going into the new year. So this is what November, and there's new data available. But you can go into churchsalary.com. And for like $30, you can run a report. For $99 for an entire year, you can run unlimited reports, unlimited positions. You can do repeated reports on the same position, inputting different data. But churchsalary.com takes demographic data. It'll look at the size of your church. In other words, the attendance numbers. It'll look at your budget numbers. It'll look at the degree level, the education level of your pastor. It just brings in a lot of data, so you have an accurate comparison. How many years has the pastor been in ministry? Are they ordained or not? Things like that. And it calculates all that, even considers the region of the country that your church is in. It looks at metropolitan versus rural areas. So there's so much information that's available by going to churchsalary.com. This is not a professional paid endorsement of them by any means. It's just a tool that I have found that really has served me well working in this area. Just a note here, we talk a lot about ministers' housing allowance, and that is going to pop up now and then through today's event, I believe. It's because it's just really important, and it's part of a well thought out compensation package. Now, that discussion is more complex than we'll have time to take here today. We just did it on our last webinar, our most recent one. That webinar is available again on our website. So you'll find the link at the end of this webinar. So back to you, Jim.
Well, thanks, David. Go to Nabil now. Nabil, would you take a few minutes to speak into what we refer as the cost of ministry versus the cost of a minister?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity, and thank you for all who is attending this afternoon. I know you are all busy, and you took time to be with us and to educate yourself. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to be able to share a little bit of how you can be advocates for yourself, and we can advocate for you as well. At the same time, we want to make sure that you do what you do best, and we try to do what you do best, and we partner together. And as far as compensation, we know that our congregations come from a congregational background where we organize and structure with board of elders or a different form of structure. But those boards and those leaders who determine the structure and the governance of the congregation also determine the compensation of the minister or ministers if there's multiple staff. And all these board members usually come from different backgrounds, different walks of life, and they come with great skills. But one thing in common we found over the years that sometimes they do not fully understand the structure of a church or the business of the church, and that will impact how they would look at the compensation for a ministerial staff, specifically a senior pastor if it's a solo pastor. So we find a lot of times that they would like to simplify, and they would just bring the pastor and they tell them, hey, this is a lump sum. You go do your ministry and live off that amount, and then God bless you. And we find oftentimes that they are not necessarily blessing their pastor to the maximum, because a lot of those funds are going to be unnecessarily taxed because all the funds that are going to the pastor's pocket not necessarily is used for the pastor. So a rule of thumb, we're talking about the cost of minister versus the cost of ministry. So if you look at it, the cost of a minister, or the cost of a minister should, all the funds must benefit the minister and their family. In parallel, or in diametrically opposite, if you want to look at it, the cost of ministry, all the funds should go to benefit the congregation. Let me give you some examples. For example, if you expect your minister to do hospital visitations, to go on conferences, to get professional development like books and anything that will improve on his teaching and preaching, or her teaching and preachings, then you want to make sure that you give them the opportunity to get those funds separately from their salary or income, because if that was part of their income, then that would be unnecessary taxed. And if they're doing visitations, there's some mileage as well that you can reimburse. So that's why you need to have a reimbursement plan, where you would look at who, where, when, and why. You bring those receipts, and he or she could get reimbursed instead of paying out of pocket the taxed dollars. When it comes to benefits, the minister's benefits, we encourage the church to purchase those, because if this money was given to the minister directly to purchase those benefits, it will go through payroll and it will be subject to payroll taxes. And there's a huge disadvantage from that. So we discourage that. We encourage you to do the research. Do you purchase those benefits and offer them to your minister? You will not pay more. You will pay the same thing, but you will give your minister more. So that's why we want to encourage you to invite us to those conversations if you're in transition, or if you have evaluations and all that, and make sure that you use us, because we have a wide range of experience in that, and we want to serve you. Back to you, Jim.
Well, thank you, Nabil. We'll move on to Chuck, changing subjects. Would you speak to the issue of paying your pastor via a 1099 versus a W-2, and which is appropriate and why?
Well, I appreciate that. The opportunity to honor the pastor through the pay. The pastor's not there to paint the building. He's there to shepherd the people. And as a professional, a W-2 is the way you would recognize that. It's 1099 is far too limited. A W-2 gives a pastor many benefits that don't cost the congregation anything, but places that pastor in a much superior position to where they would be with a 1099. For instance, that W-2 allows that pastor to have savings withdrawn, for investment in their retirement package. Can't do that with a 1099. That also that W-2 allows that pastor to, as they have those monies taken out, they save on the SECA, the SECA tax, which is like 15.3%. They don't have to pay that, because that money comes from their W-2 directly into their retirement plan, and they save that money. So it's flexible. It's more economical for the pastor, and it's also honoring the role that they play in the life of the congregation. And again, it doesn't change any cost for the congregation, but it positions that pastor in a far better place to continue their ministry and service to the church.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chuck. And, with I think our experience and what we know is that if you expect a pastor to be in the pulpit every Sunday, the IRS says you should classify them as a W-2 employee.
Yeah.
There's probably only 1% of all possible pastors that could be a 1099. Most should be a W-2. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
David, since Servant Solutions is all about helping those in Christian service and ministry plan for a comfortable retirement, kind of where Chuck was leading to, we don't want to overlook that before we go. So would you speak into the area of retirement benefits?
Absolutely. I would love to. Well, as we kind of look at the area of retirement specifically, it's kind of zooming in on this one area of benefits. Let's just talk about the organization's role in helping provide for a comfortable retirement for your pastors, for your leaders. If your church isn't doing anything presently, and we find that many churches are not, they are providing for the pastor to be able to save their own income for retirement if they want to, as Chuck said, by putting them on a W-2 and allowing the church to deduct. By the way, I want to interject here for those churches that are concerned about that W-2 1099 issue. Just know this. There is no cost to the church. It doesn't change anything for the church to move their pastor from a 1099 contractual employee to a W-2 employee. It's just a matter of how it's done in payroll processing. That's all. It's how it's reported. So that's very important because often we find at churches I talk to, the first question is, well, what all does it take and how much will it cost? And is it difficult? No, it's just a matter, literally, if you use payroll software, if someone's doing it in-house, it's checking a different box. That's all on. And if you use a payroll service, then it's letting that service know that this pastor is a W-2 employee. So I'm glad that came up with Chuck. But that's one step of just being able to do that and not feel like it's going to be burdensome on the church. But offer the W-2 reporting so they can make their pre-tax saving through withholding on that. And then a plan, because it's important to plan, and now is a great time to plan. If it's getting late in your budgeting time, if your budget is wrapped up and ready to go for congregational approval soon, then now is a great time to plan. Plan for the next year. Don't allow this just to get pushed off until next fall. Many churches, they do plan for some kind of an annual, at least a review or a look at a possible increase, whether it's a merit increase, taking on additional responsibilities, finding that the pastor's investing more time than they originally thought it would be, or just wanting to keep up with the COLA, cost of living adjustments. Now's the time to plan for that. And we just encourage getting started somewhere with retirement. We at least, while our goal, when churches say, what should we be actually providing, encouraging for a pastor's retirement? We say our goal is 11 to 12%. Now, for some, that might seem like way out there somewhere. So we just encourage starting somewhere as a church contribution, as a church match, start somewhere. 2% would be a number that I would encourage to start with and be able to build up from there. So in the next year, if the church plans on offering a 3% or a 4% COLA increase, maybe that increase comes in the form of a 1% toward retirement and 3% toward actual salary increase. But it can be part of that. It doesn't have to be a cost of living increase and an increase to their retirement. Now, if the church is doing well, if God has been blessing in that way, then it should be both. We should be able to keep up with a COLA increase as well as saying, hey, pastor, we're going to bump your requirement by another percent or 2%. And I also want to interject here. I really encourage churches to challenge their pastor to save by offering a match. It's one thing to say, we're providing a way for you to have your savings withheld before taxes, and we will send them the servant solutions on your behalf, yada, yada. But it's another thing to say, pastor, if you will withhold X dollars from your pay, we will match that. And we'll match it up to that certain percent. As I mentioned, the goal would be 11%, 12%. But start somewhere. And by doing that, you're offering the pastor, get this, you're offering the pastor an immediate 100% return on their money. If you challenge me and say you're going to match my $100 a pay, $200 per month, whatever that number is, the day that you withhold that $200 from me and then you match it, you're sending $400 to my account. I withheld $200 of my own savings, but I have $400 in my account now. You just can't do that very many places nowadays, folks. So I really encourage you, if you're a church leader, seriously consider that match. Can your church afford to do it? Absolutely, you can afford to do it. I would say we can't afford not to. I just have always looked at this. We have pastors to steward. Pastors are an incredible resource that are gifted to the church to lead the church, to shepherd the church forward. And what is the church's responsibility as stewards of that resource that God has given us? So I believe that we can't afford not to do that as a matter of stewardship. Often churches will say, and I've heard this, well, it's hard for us to put a whole lot toward a pastor's retirement because we don't know that they're going to retire here. Our pastor is only 30 or only 40 or whatever that number is. And we don't know that they're going to be retiring here. So why really should we do that? Again, broaden the picture, the kingdom of God, and it's a matter of stewardship. And so even if the pastor is not going to retire here at this current church, you have an opportunity to sow into the kingdom by knowing that our servants are well taken care of. This is a benefit, church leaders, that's going to go with them throughout their, not just their ministry career, but their entire life in retirement as well. It doesn't take that much. In fact, I'm going to ask Jody, if you have a table here, we could throw up, just glancing at the feasibility. This, just to give you just an eyeball at this, folks, let's just take a $50,000 salary right there in the middle. And if you look at starting at 1%, I mean, look at the difference it would be. 1% is $42 a month, $500 a year. If we jump to 300 or 3%, we're looking at $1,500 impact on the church budget to be able to say, Pastor, we will match you up to 3% of your salary. So you're encouraging the pastor to save, you're matching it, and it's immediately doubled. And of course, any combination, we threw another line there of $75,000. Just you can mix and match these combinations. If someone were at 100,000, just top and bottom line, put them together, and you can see the impact there. And what it would be to your church budget. So it's definitely something that's affordable. We just encourage you to continue to adjust as time goes on then once you get started. And whatever this amount is, remember, it's even more multiplied. Chuck mentioned earlier, when you add in the tax saving benefits, that it's sheltered from the SECA taxes, federal income tax, things like that. And remember, we commented about housing. Ministers get to withdraw these savings as tax-free housing allowance in retirement. Ministers, for the sake of taxes, are never considered in retirement. You're not at a church, so you don't have housing allowance. Ministers have housing allowance throughout their entire life, leaving the ministry as a retired credential ministry. That's pretty huge, and it's important for us to know. Jim, I could go on about that, but I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you. And this is so good. Thank you, gentlemen, for being our panelists. But today, in the brief time we've had together, we've hit on just a few areas of being mindful about caring for your pastor. And I just want to hit just a few more that we have not talked about before we wrap up. The first is consider a SECA offset. Our panelists and myself, we share in being pastors, and we live this world, this weird world of pastoral compensation. And we are considered dual status. And what that means is the IRS considers us a W-2 employee, where the Social Security Administration considers us a self-employed person. And so that has ramifications. That means that if I was treated as a regular employee, the church would have to pay half my Social Security, which is half of 15.3%. That is 7.65%. So that would be already a cost that the church would already pay for a W-2 employee. So, but because pastors can opt out of Social Security, they have to pay full freight. They have to pay 15.3% on all their compensation. And so that is crippling at times. And so what I would suggest is that you at least provide 7.65 as a SECA offset. And that would go a long way in helping that kind of disadvantage go away. Also, health insurances such as medical, dental, vision, long-term disability, short-term disability. I've already seen in my short tenure here churches that have had a disability of their pastor, and they are in a quandary about what to do. Should we keep paying our pastor that is not able to fulfill their duties, and how long? We want to take care of the family, but not leave them in the lurch, but we need to move on. Long-term and short-term disability are inexpensive ways to make sure that that scenario and uncomfortableness is covered. And then time off, vacation. make sure that that's plentiful. How much does it really cost to offer your pastor an additional week? And then also sabbatical leave. For example, after each 7 years of full-time ministry, in addition to vacation, that you give them 2 to 3 months just rest and renewal for their next season of ministry. But with all this, keep in mind that fringe benefits can be offered only to W-2 employees. So that's why it's important, what Chuck earlier said, that your pastor should be W-2 in 99% of the cases. So Ellen Daniels is on the screen and with us today and serves as our Director for Engagement. Ellen, can you please lead us in any of Q&A time that we have?
Yes, be glad to. Thanks for the great discussion, guys. Awesome handles on how to handle pastoral compensation, so thank you. We have some great questions. I'm just going to start firing them if you don't mind. Jim, give us an idea what percentage of churches are offering health insurance? We didn't touch on that today. I know it's kind of all over the board, but how would you answer that question? What percentage of our churches offer health insurance?
Well, we don't really know. We don't have access to payroll data or benefit data. But we could answer the retirement question, but health insurance is all over the board, just like you said. But as a feel, I would say that once a church gets into a budget range of above 500,000 or above, they usually can offer that. But most go through the exchange and just say, hey, pastor, you're on your own, get your own individual insurance. David or Nabil, being executive pastors recently, what's your feel for that?
Nabil,
You're
anything?
right. You're right. And when it comes to the marketplace, I've seen churches provide allowance to offset some of that cost. But because for smaller churches, it's becoming like a challenge is to afford the premium of policies, especially if they're not part of bigger groups. So I think we're on the right track. We don't have the information, but we have that kind of feel. David?
Yeah, and also I'll add to that. So some churches do go to the marketplace because group health is so expensive. I just spent some time talking with a church a day before yesterday, and they're in this very similar situation. In fact, their premiums went up so much this year. They're looking at maybe switching to encouraging their staff to get their own health insurance, and they're then going to set up a health savings account so that they can put an additional compensation amount in an HSA, and then the pastor or the staff member gets their own insurance, and they can then draw from that to pay the premium, either pay it in full or help offset that. And that's, there's a lot of great marketplace insurance available out there, and it's can be very reasonable depending on the income level. So I would say, yeah, that's definitely an option, Jim. But I'm finding probably my experience as I talk to churches when I'm out and about, probably about a good solid third are including of smaller churches, they're including some kind of compensation or offset. It might be just for the pastor. Then as the church grows and they have the resources, sometimes they'll say, we'll cover the pastor's family. But anyhow, if you have multiple pastors, you do need to do it the same for each classified position. So, yeah.
Great answers. Guys, we are getting a ton of questions, so I want to make sure I mention here, we will be sending you a direct link to this webinar so that you can share it with your board or other members of your staff if they were not able to be on. As well, this will be posted on our website tomorrow, so be sure you look for that. Individual questions that we don't get to today, please know we will be answering those one by one, so be looking for that answer. But a really good question here. What if I am a solo pastor and I don't have an advocate for me? How do I go about bringing up this discussion? I know we've done this a lot. We meet with teams, with boards on Zoom, but any other suggestions you guys might mention?
I would just say this is so difficult to do for yourself. And to bring maybe somebody like Servant Solutions along with you, you're not alone. You have expertise. Many of us have been in the board seat as well and understand their hearts. And many of them have nothing but good intentions in this area. They just don't know what they don't know. And to have a third party come in and be an advocate for both the church and the pastor is edifying. And so just know, don't go through that alone. Give us a call and we can figure out your unique situation and see if we can maybe arrange some way to communicate in a healthy way.
I really agree with that. Yeah, just it's so personalized to the church, and I agree with that, Jim. Call and talk to one of us, or reach out to us, and then let us walk with you through that because it is so different to each church.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. This is a good question. I've never heard this question. Does it matter how many children I have, or should it matter the amount of compensation that I'm given? Interesting. Thoughts?
I'll be glad to I'll give just an immediate response to that. I would not expect that the church should adjust your compensation based on the size of your family, because that can really skew things. I'll tell you this, I mentioned churchsalary.com earlier. Church salary does not ask if you're married, if you have kids, whatever, because if you think about it out in the workplace, it's difficult to go to any employer and say, well, because I have one child or four children, you should then adjust my compensation. So I would just say, to not disappoint or discourage, that should not be really expected. It should be based on the position, the size of the church budget. And that should be the same for a pastor with 0 children, or a single pastor, quite frankly, or a pastor with 5 or 6 children. That's mine. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to that.
No, I think that becomes a question of fairness too. I mean, it's not as if we would have any control over the fertility of a family.
Right. It's a great question. It's a great question. Yeah.
Discussion.
Right.
Yeah. What if I am a Church of God pastor who's now serving in a non-Church of God church? Can Servant Solutions still help me? Can I still participate in my plan? And can they help guide the church in these kinds of issues?
Well, there's a fact that you're a member, that you have member benefits, but there's also, the fact that the church also, as the paymaster and controlling the payroll, that matters in these situations as well. So if you are at a different church, they control whether they have Servant Solutions or their employer retirement plan, just like a health plan or anything. So they hold some keys that you don't. But we have in the past that with pastors in transition, if they move to a church that has a weak plan or no plan, they said, hey, I know someone that's great at doing this. Can we explore that? It doesn't cost the church a thing. And we have continued that relationship where that church has accepted us and then started contributions again. But only ministry income from a church that accepts Servant Solutions can go into your Servant Solutions account. Nabil, you have anything else to add to that?
No, I agree. If it's an independent church, yes, we would be happy to reach out and talk to you about that. Usually, if it's part of another denomination, we have like a gentleman's agreement that we do not cannibalize each other across denominations. We want to respect that and we want to take care of our brethren. But if it's a non-denominational or independent church, we'd be happy to explore that.
Great. One more question here quickly. I know we're past our time. Is it possible for my spouse to keep the housing allowance benefit in retirement once the pastor passes away?
Wow, that's a great question. That's something the Church Benefits Association, of which we're a part, has brought up to the legal sphere because we believe that the spouse is just as much part of the ministry in many cases, and should deserve that. However, that's not the case. Current law states that the housing allowance passes away with the pastor, even if the spouse is a pastor, but the money that the original pastor earned sticks with them, and so that housing allowance doesn't transfer over just because the assets transferred over to the spouse. So unfortunately, that's not the case. There's a lot in that question as far as what we've been trying to do and talk to representatives in Congress about. But just know that it's not a dead issue with our association and with us. We recognize that that's a reality, and we wish it wasn't there, but it is.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, guys, it looks like that's all we have time for today. Again, we will be answering each and every question that was asked. We thank you so much for that. So be watching your email. Jim, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Ellen, for leading that. And thanks to our panelists today. And thanks to you all for taking the time to join us. We truly are here to serve those who serve. And if there's any way we can help in initiating a conversation with your church, please just reach out and let us walk with you in that process. We would be glad to Zoom into a board meeting or a finance committee meeting. We can help provide compensation numbers and information, whatever might help. So Ellen, can you share some resource links with us and then close us with prayer?
Definitely. Just so you know, each resource link that we talked about today, so churchsalary.com as well as many others, they're posted on our website. So we'll be sending you a direct link to that. You also see the QR code on the screen. Again, remember, as someone who participated in this webinar, you will receive an email that will have all this information in it, as well as the graph that we showed earlier that David referred to. We just really want to thank you, especially in this season of Thanksgiving. We're so thankful for what you do for the kingdom. No matter what your title is or what place you serve in a valuable place for God's kingdom. So thank you. If you don't mind, I'd love to close this in prayer today. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we're so thankful, God, for each person on this call and for the kingdom purposes that you've given us. Lord, no matter what role we play, may we always be people of integrity as we serve other people. May we be purposeful, Lord, as we have these critical conversations, purposeful to offer humility and to be people of trust and integrity. Lord, thank you again. Thank you for this time. Thank you for the knowledge shared. And Lord, it's in your holy name that we ask these things and we thank you for them. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Blessings to you all.
Thank you, everybody. Good to have you with us today.
Bye.
Bye-bye.